Hi all and welcome to the fourth Unity tutorial video. In this one we're going to go through game objects and components. Okay, in the last one I showed you quickly how to create some game objects and affect its position, rotation and scale. I'm not going to recover that, but what I am going to go through is just this inspector panel on the right hand side here. Okay, now a game object is literally anything that it can be used in Unity. It can be 3D objects, characters, sounds, invisible objects, scripts, anything. Okay, and we're going to go through a lot of them later on and use them a lot, so get used to them. And this is actually what makes Unity so powerful, that everything is based on one sort of thing. So if I have a look at my 4 objects in the hierarchy, and I select the main camera, on the right hand side you'll see that it starts with a transform. If I click on cube, it starts with a transform, then the plane, and then the sphere. It's because every single object in the game, even if it's an empty object, still has a position, a rotation, and a scale. Okay, and it's very important to know that because it allows you to do so much with them. Okay, yep. So basically, what I want to demonstrate quickly, we're going to use these objects to create a little object of our own. So I'm going to delete these 3 I've got here already. Keep the camera. Let's go for a cube. Alright, and I'm going to scale its body up a little bit. So we're going to stretch it across. And this is going to be really, really dodgy, but bear with me. I'm going to create a cylinder. I'm going to move it out of the way so I can see it. I'm going to rotate it. Now, there's a nice little trick to rotating. If you hold the control key, it will actually rotate in 15-degree parts. So if I rotate normally, you can see the values on the Z up here, they change really quickly. However, if I hold the control key, you'll see they change in 15. And what that does is that allows me to get almost a perfect 90 degree, or even easier, I could just type 90. And there you go. So I'm going to scale it down on the Y. And let's move it in. Not a fan of how big that is. Let's scale it a little bit more. Alright. See if you can guess what I'm making so far. I'm pretty sure you could. Alright, now what we can do in this, in Unity, I find it a little bit annoying, but you can actually copy objects. Not as easy as I'd hope. And you can just sort of duplicate it and move it for the next one over here. So what we can do is you go up to edit, copy, or you can go duplicate, Control D. I should just do that. Okay, and you'll see there's 2 cylinders now. You'll see the selection doesn't change because they're on top of each other. So if I move, there it is. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to Control click and duplicate again. The next time is Control D for you. Reference, move it over the other side. Now we've got 4 wheels. Yes, it's a dodgy little car. Okay, the next bit is we're going to create a sphere. Okay, we're not going to go too detailed in this. Okay, I'm going to scale the sphere down. Move it in. Yep, that's about right. I'm going to duplicate it. That was Control D, if you don't know how to duplicate. And I've got my little Lego car. It's got 4 wheels, 2 headlights, and we're good to go. Okay, when we learn 3D editing, we can show you how to actually make a car, or a better object for that matter. For the moment, this is just an example I want to use. Now, these objects can be used for almost anything. If you can think of it, and you can imagine it, you can probably do it. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, every single headlight needs to produce some lights. So, nice little trick is we can actually go up to game object and we can create something other than a 3D object. Okay, we can have all these different lights. You can even do 3D text, and I'll do them in a bit. Okay, I'm going to do what we call, there's 4 different types of lights. Okay, and they all have different features, you could say. Directional light is like a sun. Okay, it affects everything in the world. It has no limit to how far it will affect. Okay, a point light, okay, as you can see, is like a bubble. If I move it out of the car, you can see how it sort of works there. It sort of tries to affect everything it can in that radius. And the one that we want is going to be a spotlight. Because you can see it's like a torch. Okay, and that's more like a car light. So first things first, let's move him out. Now because the car's black, what I'm going to do is I'm actually create a directional light so I can get some light behind the car. So if you go to game object and create directional light, see that? You got a little sun here. Okay, and you get light all over, except for where it's behind. If I move it around, a bit better. Okay, so with the spotlight, you can see car's obviously not going to point downwards, so we'll rotate it. Okay, so we'll go to the rotate tool. Same thing again, I'm going to control and move. Perfect. Okay, let's move him in the spot. Now there's a nice little trick. It's pretty hard in a 3D world to get it something exactly where you want it. Okay, so there's a couple of tricks. We can use this gizmo up here on the right. Okay, this navigation. If I click on the Y, I'm going to get my top view. Okay, and what I can do is move it over in the light and rotate. You'll notice it's too high. So what I can do is go to the X and then move it down. And I want it a little bit in, so we can move it in. And there you go. I've got my first one. So I'm going to duplicate. Well, no, I won't duplicate just yet. And what we can do is have a look at this radius. Now, a car light is not going to be that skinny. If we have a look over here on the right hand side, we've got all these different settings for this light. Alright, now don't change the type because that's changing between directional point and all that. What we can change, or we want to change, is the angle. How broad it would go. You can see we can go all the way up to 180 degrees. Now a car light's probably about that much, and we can even change the colour to a little bit yellow. Because that's the way it is. Now we can't really see what's going on because there's nothing in front of us, so you'll see how the light is just affecting it. What we can do is you can actually increase the range. Okay, if I increase that to 50, it's hitting all of it. If I decrease it a little bit, you'll see it's only just partially hitting it. Okay, I'm fairly happy with that. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to go duplicate, move. There you go, we've got our two headlights for our little brum brum. Alright. From that point, what we can do is you can actually script that car, and when you want the headlights to turn on or off, all you'd really have to do is turn the light off. Okay, and you're done. Okay, it's that easy to use Unity. It's quite handy in some respects. Okay, now the next thing I'm going to show you is just like a little neat trick where you can group objects together. Okay, if I click on this body here and I move it, that's not what I want. I want the wheels, the headlights, and the lights to come with it. That's not really that used. And what we can do is you can actually group all these things together, and that's where our empty object comes into play. Notice the shortcut as well, Control-Shift-N, that's really handy. So what we can do is I can create an empty object. I'm going to rename it. I'm going to call it car. But you'll notice it's called car, if I select it and I move it, it says nothing there, it's empty, it's nothingness, it's just a spot. Okay, and what we can do is if you select all the pieces of your car, control click or you can drag. I'm just going to do a drag grab. And up here on the hierarchy, you click and drag all these things into car. Just like that. So you get that blue highlight there. And there it is. And what that means is when I select car, it moves all the same. So that's a quick tutorial of how to use different objects in a way. That's how introduction to lights and grouping of objects. It's really important that you learn grouping. It's really handy. But I think the next thing we need to go through is a little fun. Components and some physics. Okay, I'm going to delete all these objects. Okay, I'll keep the directional light. Okay, and the next bit we're going to do is I'm just going to create a plane. And I'm going to create a cube. Alright, and the idea of this one is I just want to demonstrate to you physics. I just want to see this cube fall and hit that. That is all. Okay, obviously it's not going to fall while I'm editing my game. I have to play it, and I need to make sure that my camera can see everything. You can see there's nothing on the camera at the moment. So, where's my camera? See, it's not even looking in the right direction. So I'm going to move my camera up and around. Rotate it a little bit. Okay, and if I click the camera, I can see that there's everything. If I go to game view, that's what it's going to look like. Alright, so let's just press play. Box should fall, nothing. Now, what's actually happening here is there's a built-in physics engine for Unity. It's brilliant, really, really handy. But at the moment, you have to tell Unity what objects are going to be affected by the real world physics, like gravity and friction and things like that, and going to be colliding with one another. The easiest way to have a look at, we need to start with components, sorry. Over here on the right, every time you see one of these little boxes, they are components, each one of those. Okay, there's even an add component button, and I'll show you that in a second. So transformers, we've already looked at in a fair amount of detail. That'll be there for every object. Okay. Cube. Now, this is what you call a mesh. It sounds pretty complex, but it's pretty simple. The mesh is simply what you're looking at. So if we have a click on cube, you'll see there's a little selector here. I can even change the shape of my object on the fly. Okay? So I'm going to leave that there. The box collider is probably the most impressive things that I've seen. If you have an object that's affected by physics, it will still collide with this cube, but this cube will not move. Okay, and I'll show you what that means in a moment. Okay, but what that basically is just saying that anything around me is going to hit me. That's all. And it's just going to stay still. The mesh renderer basically tells Unity that I want this 3D cube drawn when I play the game. That's all. Alright, let's have a look at some physics. I want this cube to fall onto the plane. If we have a look at the plane, it's actually got the same setup, except for it's got a different mesh filter. Okay, if I have a look at the light, it's got it's got a light component. Okay, so it tells it all the different features of being a light. Okay, and you can play around with all these different settings and all that kind of stuff. I think soft shadows you have to be, Unity Pro to use them. It's a bit unfortunate, but oh well. Alright, so from there, let's have a look at physics. Okay, let's add a component. We want to go to physics. And we want a rigid body. Now, rigid body is how you tell Unity to add physics to an object. So I'm going to click on that, and all of a sudden I've got all these things. I've got mass drag, angular drag, gravity, kinematic, interpolate, collision detection, constraints. Now, all of these are very, very useful. Okay? The most obvious two are going to be mass and use gravity. Right now, let's press play. Look at that. With one change, all I did was I added a rigid body component, and it fell. Okay, let's play again. So that's all gravity just working on its own. Now, interestingly enough, it looks a bit boring, but let's rotate this a little bit, and you'll see the physics in play. So it's a proper physics engine. It's really, really handy. And now what we can do is you can change all the settings. So what we're going to do right now is I'm going to change the mass. I'm going to change it to 50. Okay, see how quickly it falls. Not very different. Okay. Oh well. You can even turn off gravity. So if we untick that, it's still going to collide with things, but gravity won't affect it. Okay. Another interesting thing about components is I can, while the game is playing, I can actually play with these values. See that? Okay. The only difference is I tick that during gameplay. So when I unplay, the tick goes away. So I can change things during runtime and it all gets reset afterwards. Okay, it's really interesting. Now we're not going to go through the other settings right now. What we are going to look at is the game's physics settings quickly. So let's say we want the objects to fall a bit quicker. Okay, I'm going to drag them up. Okay, we can go down to project settings and physics. Okay. And you'll see all these different settings. I'm not going to go through much of this, but right here is our gravity value. Okay, by default that is 9.8 meters per second per second. Okay, let's say we want to reverse gravity. Let's go to 9. Okay, where's my camera? Can I see everything? I'm going to pull the camera out of it. Whoop. Retick that. Try it again. I can even do it sideways. Let's go back to the project settings. Physics. Let's go 3 on the X. And you should see it go off on a bit of an angle. Whee! Essentially, it could be used for a couple of things. If you want games, if you want to be able to walk on the roof and things like that, you could easily change these values to do that during runtime with the script. So I've just gone to -1, so that means it should travel down really slowly. So yeah, that there is how you do really basic physics. Okay, the only way to add a bit more functionality to your game is going to be to write or to add scripts into your game. Okay, and there's a couple of ways you can do that. I'm not going to show you scripting until a lot later, but we're going to use a lot of scripts very soon. The best resource I've found for scripts is actually this one here. Okay, it's the Unify community. Okay, and you just go, I just googled Unity scripts, and this was the second link. Okay, and you get general scripts, you get editor script, controllers, GUI, effects, physics, simulation, and all that. Let's have a look at controllers. This is probably the one we'll use the most. Okay, now without too much detail, there's plenty of things you can do, like click to move, so you can add that to a character to be able to click the mouse or click a screen. Okay, ship controls, that's pretty interesting. Okay, and heaps of other stuff. Okay, oh, FPS Walker, there you go. And we'll probably use that one later on. Now, it's up to you. Let's have a look at one last set of components. What I'm going to do is remove this rigid body, and it's quite easy to remove something. You just go up to the cog and remove component. Or you can reset the values if you've changed too much and you don't like them. Alright, what we're going to do now is I'm going to add another physics one, and this one's going to be called a hinge joint. Now what I'm trying to show you here is not what a hinge joint does, but requirements for a component. Notice that it just added a rigid body in there. Okay, but I deleted mine, so let's try and remove it again. Because sometimes there are components, like a hinge joint, that require other components. Okay, so sometimes you just need to know that, and that's just a little joint. So a hinge joint can be used to emulate like a door. It could be a hinge, and you can even add limits, like a break force to it, which means that if the player hits it hard enough, it breaks off the hinge and goes flying. Okay, but there's lots and lots of things that you can do. We'll leave the video here, and we'll have a look in the next one. We're going to have a look at your standard assets for Unity and how to make a terrain and edit it. Alright, have fun everyone.